We welcome back as our speaker today Professor Piet Hut, Professor Emeritus, Institute for Advanced Study, Princeton. Piet got his PhD at Utrecht University, Amsterdam, in the combined field of astrophysics and particle physics, after which he moved to the United States. At age 32, he was appointed full professor at the Institute for Advanced Study at Princeton. Since then, he has been dividing his research time between natural science and studies of the mind. In this regard, at age 17, he discovered meditation, and upon reading the Gospel of Ramakrishna, became convinced that it made sense to look for connections between his two great interests, the studies of matter and mind. The many parallels he found in his studies of Vivekananda's Jnana Yoga, Raja Yoga, Advaita Vedanta, medieval Christian mysticism, Japanese Zen Buddhism, and Tibetan Buddhism strengthened his conviction that it made sense to treat contemplation in a scientific way. At the same time, during his research in natural science, he has covered various broad areas of interdisciplinary studies. He and his colleagues were among the first scientists studying connections between impacts of asteroids and comets and the demise of the dinosaurs. Actually, asteroid 17031, Piet Hut, is named after him in honor of his work in planetary dynamics and for founding the B6-12 Foundation, which focuses on prevention of asteroid impacts on Earth. Rather important, I think. His most recent project is FEST, F-E-S-T, Fully Empirical Science and Technology, the idea of which is to lay the foundations for a science of mind in parallel to natural science, as the established science of matter. Googling his name will get you to the FEST website. So today, we are so happy to have you back, Piet, and the subject of his talk today is Unity and Simplicity in Science and Contemplation. Welcome back.
It's a great pleasure to be back again after a couple months. I'm sure many of you, but I have the mic here. Okay. It's a real pleasure to come back again, and some of you may have been here clearly. I recognize them. For others, it will be the first time. And I would say I will try to keep this talk shorter than the last time when I went way over time, which was fun, I think, for me, and so to see from the audience too, since I really would like to have more questions and maybe no answers, or answers from the audience too. But we'll see how that goes. So, the last time I talked about my interest in natural science and in contemplation, and I did not say so much how they could relate to each other. I was pointing out, I had pointed out some similarities between the two, but today I would like to do a step back, and rather than focus on science, and rather than focus on contemplation or meditation or spirituality, there are many names for that, I would like to focus on reality. After all, it is the reality in which we can analyze matter, like in natural science, in which we can analyze the mind, like in contemplation. And as we just heard already, I'm trying with as many people as I can find who are interested in seriously studying the methodology of natural science insofar as it carries over to contemplation. It does not mean brain studies. Neuroscience is a very interesting topic, and every week we learn about new discoveries. It's really wonderful that science can stretch itself out to studies of the brain. But from studies of the brain to studies of the mind is still a big leap. And there is no guarantee that starting with matter that you can find the depths of the mind. It may or may not be, we just don't know. We are beginning to make the first steps about how neurons interact with each other, how neural networks, with the chemistry and the electromagnetism and everything involved is correlated with the brain. But in how far correlation and in which way correlation could be anything like causality, we don't know. Even in the study of matter in quantum mechanics, the old idea of causality, which reigned for 250 years from Newton to the beginning of quantum mechanics, that old causality doesn't work anymore. That was one of the big surprises in quantum mechanics. And actually, almost everything in quantum mechanics, the basic elements, they were not expected, they were not predicted, but what is more, they could not possibly have been predicted. There was just nothing in our conceptual knowledge or conceptual way of thinking that prepared us for that. And still, this year, 100 years after quantum mechanics, still there are so many different interpretations and so many attempts in different ways to make sense of it in the old concepts that we have. But of course, that is clearly not something which is possible. We have to make new concepts, and people are trying to work on that. But what the title of my talk goes, as far as that goes, the idea of unity between the ice and water. You can melt them, but it's all H2O. Unity between electricity and magnetism, which look very different, but they were the basic building blocks for electromagnetism, which then works in all of your cell phones. The unity between space and time, which led to unity of matter and energy, that gave us nuclear physics with all the power and responsibility which we have. And the ultimate thing which has been unified yet in physics is gravity and quantum mechanics. But beyond that, the next unification I expect to see is a real unification between matter and mind, between a study of matter and a study of mind. And if all of the previous history of physics can help us, then every unification brings out new concepts, new ideas. The notion that in quantum mechanics the building blocks of matter are neither particles nor are they waves. There was a discussion of hundreds of years which one it would be, but actually it was something which, as I already hinted at, something which was not predicted, something which had properties of both. So whatever it is about a possible unification of matter and mind, experience, deeper notions, deeper way of thinking and in then we have either, I would say, excuse me? Yeah, I'm wearing a mic. Last time I was speaking in the
Still not working.
Yeah.
Sorry.
speak.
Here's the place.
Now you can just speak here.
Yeah.
And,
Okay. This.
It could be the sales.
Yeah.
It could be the battery issue. Can I just take the...
Sure. Whenever you do something new, there is a period of experimentation and confusion. It is true in science, it's true in contemplation, it's true for my second talk here as well. If you talk in a microphone, then naturally you talk louder. But with the modern technology, speak slow, softer. Can people? Yes. I hear myself echoing, so it sounds good. Okay, so how do we say about unity, as I just hinted, and simplicity? It seems to be that whenever we go to a deeper and deeper unity, we find more simplicity. We don't know what it is. There was no reason to expect that. And I don't know whether there is ever a way to know that, but that is a fact. As I think I said 2 months ago, it's a very simple equation like E is mc squared, which everybody has heard about. Actually, it means E is m, because c squared is just a conversion factor. If you would measure energy in inches, if that were possible, and matter in centimeters, you would have a conversion factor. So before Einstein discovered E is mc squared, we did not know that the two were equivalent. And we did not know, of course, which units to take. But now, if we use c squared as a conversion factor, the real message, and I wish they would tell that in school and wherever, because it's part of our culture, part of our knowledge. The real message, is E equals m. Energy and matter really are the same, and they come in different versions. Very much like H2O comes in the version of ice or steam or water. So somehow the reason that, or not the reason, the fact that unification always brings a deeper simplicity seems to be a very deep aspect of reality. So if I now want to talk about the notion of reality, then two things. First of all, the reality, the world that we live in, and our own mind, and the way we interact with each other and the rest of the world is extremely complex. Yet, you can find a few divisions, there are at least 3 coins of reality which have 2 sides each. And the coin of matter at the other side has mind. You use your mind to deal with matter, to even realize that there is matter and what to do with it. So mind and matter are like 2 sides of the coin. But another coin is the more personal sense. I have a sense of self, and I have a sense of others around me. I can hear my own thoughts, I'm aware of them, I'm not aware directly of thoughts of others. So besides matter and mind, there is another coin. The one side is self and the other side is other. So, but besides that, the whole world is like a spectacle, like a play, but the stage of the play is space and time. Everything which happens has a place where it happens, it has a time that it happens. So what can we say about reality given that we have at least 3 hints? We have a hint that there is a matter and mind side to everything. There is in our life there is a hint to self and other in everything. And also space and time are the two sides that we are dealing with. Now, the surprising thing about our culture is that it may be the first culture which almost singly focused on matter over mind, focused on self over other, focused on space over time. And what I mean is the fact that the pain point at the brain. And the general idea is that if people have psychiatric problems, then they give them medicine. And sometimes, don't get me wrong, sometimes that can be very helpful. And sometimes that can really make the life of the psychiatric patients, insofar as you want to see them as patients, as well as people around them, better. But to automatically think about using chemicals in order to change your mind, that automatism tells us that we really have a very unbalanced view focusing on matter over mind. Similarly, so in neuroscience, you could say maybe the most complex natural science, there is the idea that yeah?
I think
Is this better?
yes.
Yeah.
Unreliable.
Yeah. You can see, I warned you already, this is a very experimental talk. You see how it... The last time I was just telling you about all the wonderful things I wanted to tell you, but now I'm trying to make it more experimental, as you will see in a little while. So, the on-off button. Yeah, is this better? Yeah? Okay. Well, I wish the IT people good luck to polish all of this. It will be a challenge. But maybe it will change the story, who knows? And, something like, and then a miracle happens, and then... Okay, so matter, everything which used to be grouped under mind is often assumed to be explained by matter, and that really has a negative effect by focusing people's mind on the matter side rather than also the mind side. Then the question of self and other. Now we go from neuroscience to biology. The basic, the most important discovery in biology, I think everybody agrees about, is the principle of evolution, the evolution theory. Of course, we have DNA and many other discoveries, but everything is within the framework of evolution. Now, not so many people know that Darwin's inspiration for evolution came from Adam Smith, from the one who started the modern form of economy. And there the idea was there is a free market. It's the basis of capitalism, but not only capitalism, some form of socialism which are more balanced, but basically the idea that Charles Darwin, what helped him actually, that was the basic seed for developing evolution theory, was to assume that just like in the markets, everybody was selfish, everybody followed their own self-interest, and somehow the invisible hand of the market would make everything work optimal, better than governments, better than administrations. That's by itself not built into the evolution theory itself. More and more over time, people have developed interpretations of evolution theory where there is as much collaboration, if not more, than there is selfish interest, like in real markets. But to start from the self pole and then to try and see either economy or evolution theory, it's a very one-sided way. It's like starting with the brain in order to study the mind. I mean, the fact that they take lifetime meditators, monks and nuns and amateur serious meditators, and then they measure the brain waves. I mean, compared to the knowledge which in unbroken lineages, like this unbroken lineage, which goes back in its roots at least 4,000 years, if not more. The fact that you can find something important by looking at the brain. The studies are interesting and should continue, but that one-sided aspect, that is really impoverishing for us. And then the third one, space and time, the fact that we want to explain time by making models of space-time. Within physics, it was a breakthrough, but it was a breakthrough which all physicists agree was not an ultimate answer. It was a very important stepping stone when Albert Einstein discovered special relativity, and then from there on general relativity, that space-time actually has a dynamic effect. But the notion that time was mapped out like space, that is not real. We cannot go back in time, but we can go to and from in space. So the fact that we went for the simplest part of each of the three dualities, from mind, our culture tends to ignore the mind, the more difficult one than matter to study. It tends to ignore the way that others and self can live in a way which is not just selves trying to find the right balance, but really finding a unity between self and others. And then the fact of making time like space. I think that way of thinking about time like space may have something to do with the fact that almost everywhere in the world the political situation is such that everybody puts their head in the sand. Not everybody, but the people in power all over the place, in various ways, some more than others, ignoring the well-being of the next generation further in time and really focusing what is right now happening here in space. So with those three, I would like to how shall I say this? I would like to talk about the three mysteries coming with those three dualities. The mystery of mind, the mystery of other and subject-object relation, and the mystery of time. As for time, this moment is the only moment where you are really alive in your own experience. You are empirically alive. Your memories are memories of the past, current memories of the past. Your expectations are current expectations of the future. It is really this moment that you have access to. So it is not a surprise that in all contemplative traditions, the focus is on the now. That if you get lost in artificial information from your memory or your expectations, which is artificial compared to the real living now, then you miss out on something. And it means that if you don't know how to live in the present, that is as bad as if you don't know how to step in somebody else's shoes in the other. And it is as bad as thinking that the mind is somehow the working of the brain. So this was, I think, much less than, I got 45 minutes, but I think maybe 20 minutes so far. I would like to use the rest of the time to hear from all of you. So we are talking about matter and mind, self and other, space and time. But now I want to talk about speaker and audience. I would like all of you to talk and let us together see what we can say about these very basic topics that I have brought up.
Okay, so if you have a question, please put up your hand. And do we have a second hand mic? We'll give you a mic.
No,
okay,
no.
We'll set it up here. Okay, so you'll come and sit here.
I thought we were going to fight over the mic.
Hello, Professor. Mic check. Are we good? Yeah.
Why don't you talk in my mic?
I mean,
we can look at each other and let's forget about that.
okay.
A form of unification. Audience speaker.
Oh, I'll hand it back to you then once I'm done. Yeah.
Definitely, you better.
Yeah. Well, so I was curious about you're obviously talking about mind and matter, and as I'm sure you're aware, in Vedanta and more broadly in Indian philosophy, much more so than in Western philosophy of mind and modern cognitive science, there is a strong distinction that's made between consciousness and mind and just the mental. So I was curious about how, when you're talking about how current paradigms tend to try to reduce mind to matter, is that also, I figured that also trying to reduce consciousness to matter as well. But do you think that there's a special place for consciousness outside of this dichotomy, and how that would basically fit into the scheme of things that you're trying to parse through and integrate? I don't have a fully fleshed out way of posing the question. If I did, I probably would have the answer, but if you could just speak to that. Thank you.
Thank you. That really is a very central question, and everything you will ask me, I will answer from my own experience as best as I can in having studied natural science and working in natural science, and from what little as an amateur I have learned from meditation, contemplation, and reading, as well as engaging in it, like theory and experiment in science. So that is a disclaimer, and many people in the audience here no doubt have more experience and understanding of contemplation than I do. So in that sense, we are definitely on the same page. In any case, about the deepest question. The deepest questions are not necessarily more, how shall I say that? To get an idea about what to do with the deepest questions, the people who are experts in the current state of knowledge about that deep questions are probably the last people you want to ask if you have a completely new idea. I don't encourage people to write emails or send letters to the Institute for Advanced Study because they have better theories than Einstein had. I already have many stacks of those. But in principle, to look at a new direction, it's certainly better to have a really open mind, literally. So going back to consciousness and mind, maybe what you mean is that you have the ordinary consciousness in which we think and talk and act in the world, and you have a much deeper contemplative form of mind, no?
Not exactly.
No.
more so the sort of, if I try to do my best to explain the matter, that there are mental contents, whether they're thoughts or emotions or feelings, just general mental things. And then there's, in the sort of, if I can do my best to represent the sort of classic Vedantic notion, there's the consciousness that stands sort of as just something that's present, unchanging, present, that is conscious of the mind, much in the same way that it is conscious of matter. So in that way, both mind and matter are on the side of object, whereas consciousness is pure subject.
Thank you. That is very helpful. So the way I understand contemplation is that if you have Atman and Brahman, or you have normal consciousness and ultimate emptiness or clarity in Buddhism, and similarly in medieval Christianity they have distinction between God and the Godhead, the nature of God. So in all of these cases, the deepest mystics, the deepest contemplatives all agree that ultimately there is no distinction. So that ultimately, if you think that you are an individual isolated self, and you think that you are talking with another individual isolated self, it is ultimately the unified consciousness, to use the physics talks, that is aware of itself in a different way. And you can say, look at that in a very simple way. You have one hand with a number of fingers, but if you only look at this part, it seems separate. It's ultimately unified. I mean, there are many very simple analogies to show how simple it is. How simple unification is once you have an idea of how it works. Is this closer to? And what I see in physics as similar to the non-duality in contemplation is that every next theory is unifying more things. If I have the tops of my fingers, then they are unified in a hand, but then I have other parts of my hand, I have two arms, I have legs, etc. There is sort of like a tree of unification, and the fact that you can do that you can find these unifications, means that every theory before that is only partly right. And in science, it means that every new theory should show that in some ways the old theory was not right. And classical to quantum mechanics, which I mentioned, is one example, but there are more examples to come in the future. And the question is, in every tradition, and the traditions are not unified, that is the problem. We have to have more dialogue between different contemplative traditions. When the traditions will be more, have a way of talking to each other, what is really shared, what is really universal in whatever way, then I think it will be, then the scientific way and the contemplative way can be can make better deep contact. And I realize if I talk so long, most people cannot answer questions. So from now on, I will be very short. Try. Will you keep me honest? Maybe. No, I'm kidding. It's, okay. Yeah.
One of the things that Ramakrishna tells us is, enough with counting the leaves. We're here to eat mangoes, which is God realization. So how can you help me eat the mangoes with this kind of investigation?
Well, for this particular audience, I would say that let me not be on a pedestal here. It's getting dangerous too if I go off too often. I would say About Ramakrishna, two things come immediately to mind. I didn't remember the Mangos, but it is 50 years ago that I read the Gospel of Ramakrishna, so I hope that's okay. One thing which really struck me when I read the Gospel of Ramakrishna was that at some point Ramakrishna gave some of the holy milk for Mother Kali to a cat, which came in meowing. And that unity of being completely serious and deep into it, into the realization of deeper layers of the mind, and at the same time being able to transgress. The water is a little bit hidden. You see, this is really all improvised improvised conversation. So that is one where the unification of dealing with a cat and dealing with Kali. That was really a spontaneous expression of somebody who has understood, who has experienced non-duality. That is one. And another one, more directly, is the story where Totapuri, the Advaita Vedanta non-dualist, met Ramakrishna, and where he learned how to see even the deepest non-duality. But let me stop here. And another question. Yeah, is that close enough for the mangoes, or you want bananas, or you want something else?
I don't see how I can use this practically to enhance my spiritual practice.
To do for any step in physics, or in neuroscience or any type of science, you can only learn it by doing enough theory and experimentation and experimental knowledge, and maybe specialized, but you have to get a basic understanding in one particular field. You cannot study all of natural science or even all of physics. You choose one, then you get a sense of doing physics, and then you can see in how far you can talk with others who have a sense about other fields which can be unified. So if you only read about contemplation, then that wouldn't do it. You would have to have at least one or maybe different traditions, and really go into them initially in a very standard way, but not necessarily through all the hoops that traditional education brings you to. What I would really like to see is an institute where students as undergraduates will all learn one particular science and one particular type of contemplation, so that those two can meet up in one mind rather than talking with other people from time to time. And then if you have an undergraduate class of 100 people, where you have a number of different scientists or people who get at least an undergraduate education in science and an equivalent depth in contemplation of different contemplative traditions and different scientists, if you let those people talk with each other, that has never been done to the best of my knowledge, and I think here my knowledge is good enough. And that is something which I hope in my lifetime still to see happening somewhere in the world. Is that better?
It sounds like that might be a fun conversation, but I don't know if it would help me realize God.
Let me quote a fellow countryman of mine. Fellow countryman of mine lived in Holland, actually technically Belgium, but that was still one country, so I can still vouch for that. His name was Ruysbroek. He lived around 1300, about 700 years ago, and he was a very acclaimed theologian and played a role in the of course then Catholic Church. And at some point he retired and he went out in the woods and he dropped all that he did in his studies, theological studies. And occasionally somebody would come out in the woods and ask him something. He was such a legend. And one day there were two young seminarians who went to the woods and they finally found him. And they asked him the question that you asked, like, let me say it, let you say it in your words again.
Give me instructions in spiritual practice that I may realize God.
Yeah. The way they said it is, how can I become holy? And that is good enough, yeah? Yeah, okay. And what Rusbrook said was something they were shocked by and they didn't understand it. And I'm not claiming to understand it, but I have read commentaries later on. His answer was, you are as holy as you want to be. Does it work? So the very important thing is not you will be as holy as you want to be. That is not what he said. You are as holy as you want to be.
But that has to be realized.
No, you are.
I haven't realized that.
You are like the two young people, so you are still young at heart, obviously. What he said was that you are as holy as you want to be, so the problem is wanting to be. So you and I'm in the same place as you, similar age, similar youth. You and I, and probably most of the audience, but I won't speak for anybody else, we all think that we have to practice in order to realize something. But all the people who deeply realized said that it's so simple. How come I never have noticed that before? But they will also add that if you don't see the simplicity, well, the next best thing is just to keep slogging and, and work on it and try to be gentle to yourself and others. Yeah.
Good morning, Professor. My question is that if we believe that the mind influences matter, does it work the other way around? So does matter influence the mind?
This is a similar question as the previous question. If we think that mind and matter are separate, then we have many jobs for philosophers, for psychologists. The academical world thrives on that. But the whole point is that if you look at a coin and you see the one side and the other, if you then ask yourself, how do I unify the two? Well, it's already one coin, there are two ways to look at it. So you cannot shave off you don't have to shave off the one side and the other and then glue them together. Does that make sense? Yeah?
Yeah. So where is this beginning of fragmentation happening actually? In the sense, why is this division? Like, yeah. So and also when you say that mind and contemplating parallel with the natural science. So with the nature, when we look into the nature, so when we are nature in parallel, like a part of nature or nature itself. So what is the beginning of this fragmentation, which is kind of, evaluative mind, which is continuously blocking this division or the fragmentation? So, yeah.
Those are really central and wonderful questions. And if you have time enough, and I'm very glad that in my particular case, even in my job, I had complete freedom to choose the research I did. If you have time enough to look at a few different contemplative traditions, then you find that each one, at first it seems that each one is different. The rituals are different, the initiations are different, the whole approach is different. But then when you go deeper into it and you get a feel for what is really hidden there, that takes quite a few years in practice, then you recognize the similarities. And then once you recognize the similarities, the possibilities are open to look at it from many different sides. But I don't know whether this answered your question, or did I come close?
Yeah. So, I mean, it can't be a how, but the evaluative mind comes in the first place before you see anything. So even after seeing there is evaluation. Before seeing also, I mean, it's very fractional, and so this evaluation mind should stop. I mean, it should not evaluate. That's it. I mean, it's very difficult.
No, that is probably the only way that we can learn things. And in a way, all the questions focus, I'm really glad to see that, focus on the central point. That if, for example, let me give two answers. Let me give a simple answer. That is, if you have never played a musical instrument, then the first steps you make, well, especially if it is a violin, it sounds like a cat, and it would be bad for the neighbors if the walls are too thin. But after a while, you can play beautiful music. But anybody who has ever become a musician in whatever way, they have to start with something simple. So in that sense, I think this question is, how can you go from, how can you avoid to fall in the trap of stay in the earlier stage in order to go to the next one. So it seems that the initial practice sort of blocks the further practice, and that is true. Imagine that somebody has heard about music but doesn't know much background, doesn't know many people who play music. They may think, if I play scales, that seems to be the way to learn to play music. But if I play the scales very nicely and very precisely and very whatever, then I will become a musician. That is a mistake. Fortunately, there are enough musical instruments and enough musical teachers that in our culture nobody would make that mistake. I hope. Otherwise, we'll send him to a neuroscientist. But the fact in our culture, we have many theologians, and many of them are the ones I talked with. Generally, I get along very well. And if we have time enough to talk, they also see what I'm pointing at. But the theological education for the last 400 years, unlike in the Middle Ages, has just ignored that. If I may be very impolite, I would say it's like theology has become closer to playing scales. But that's an exaggeration. But sometimes you have to exaggerate to make things clear. But I'm a little bit hesitant because I know this will be seen by many theologians. Let me ask for forgiveness. Asking for forgiveness is always better than asking for permission.
From your quoting that you are as holy as you want to be, or you are, the problem then seems to be that we think we have to practice something, that we have to change, but you are that, or tat twamasi, as they say, and we have to just identify with that unity, not the fingers, but the hand or whatever it is. I don't know if that does it, but it seems that that's the key point. To stop thinking we're separate, to stop thinking that we need to do something. Does it make any sense, or is this too simple?
Well, no, that is really the idea, except for two things. To stop thinking is great, but then you also have to see. But if you really stop thinking, then you will see. But the big thing, which is still a mistake, baked in our language, is that there is a you, there is a person. So if you and everybody and me too ask, how can I become enlightened? That is already wrong. It's a little bit like reading a comic strip, and then you suddenly feel, oh, it's so terrible that these comic figures are locked in a two-dimensional world. Let me cut them out and let me put them on the street in 3 dimensions and see, can I liberate them in that way? Well, that's not a way to liberate a comic figure, because the comic figure is not real. And the liberation is just destroying a strip story, a comic strip. Does that make sense? We have to learn to not want to liberate the wrong thing.
So my question is that mind, you're saying, is equals to matter times the unit square. So then matter will be equal to mind divided by the unit square.
Well, yeah, if you have Celsius and... Sorry, yeah, I keep forgetting that this is a staged situation. It's too much fun. So if you have Celsius and Fahrenheit, then indeed you have a conversion factor in the one direction and the opposite conversion factor in the other. But the temperature, if you want to boil an egg, you have to do it at a boiling point, no matter whether it's 100 degrees in Celsius and 200 something in 212. Yes, I wasn't completely sure. So does this answer your question?
Is matter equals to mind, unified mind, or is mind equals unified matter?
Thank you. You really helped me to say it more accurately. What I meant with E equals M, the amount of energy and the amount of matter, they have a certain. If you have 1 gram of matter, you have an enormous. Maybe you can produce the electricity for a whole city for a year. It's an enormous conversion factor, but it is a precise number. But to measure something and to know what it is very different. What Einstein did is to know that they are the same. But then to ask, what is energy, what is matter? Already 20 years after he discovered ESMC square, it turned out that both energy and matter was very different in quantum mechanics than everybody thought before. So it's a little bit like in the present day world, people talk about metrics. They want, if you are a professor at a university, then typically you get a number of evaluations, and that comes into a certain number. If the number goes up, your salary goes up. If the number goes down, your salary goes down. That is what the administrative way of looking at knowledge gathering is becoming now. But that's a separate topic.
So, related to these topics, what's one question you wish you were asked more often? Why do you wish people would ask this question? And how would you respond to this question?
You're asking which question is I am being asked?
Yeah, so related to these topics of mind and matter, self and others, space and time, what's one question you wish you were asked more often from an audience like this? Why do you feel like this question should be asked more often, and how would you respond to such a question?
Well, the question I really want to be asked is, how can I help you start the first Western world center of learning in which contemplation and science are being treated in the same way, the same respect, and where individual students learn both. And so far, I would say in my whole life, I've had so many wonderful conversations with scientists and so many wonderful conversations with contemplatives. But really, I haven't had any conversation in which I could really talk on the same scientific level and at the same contemplative level with the same person. And it doesn't mean that I'm special, it means that the world is very strange, very weird. What little I have studied about contemplation, okay, I have gone to a number of retreats, I have gotten pointing out instructions and all kind of things, which many people do. And I know many contemplatives who are far, far deeper and spent their whole life. And I've met several teachers from different traditions, which really changed my life in a deep way. So on the scale of contemplation, what I have accomplished is, I would say, serious amateur. It is amateur, it's a serious amateur, but nothing like a professional, let alone a top contemplative. So the fact that with my limited understanding of contemplation and my deeper understanding of one particular field, well, actually a few fields, but small, certainly very far from understanding all of science, the fact that I'm familiar enough with science and familiar enough with contemplation that it says something about a society that in my whole life I've never met somebody where I didn't have to put one hand on my back in having a conversation. I talk with a Nobel Prize winner in science, and then they ask me, but how can you have objective knowledge about the mind? It is subjective. And then I have to say, like on the kindergarten level, you know, if you use a telescope to look at a cell, or if you look a microscope to look at a star, it doesn't work very well. Yes, yes. And then I go through all the steps explaining why objective is intersubjective over and over again. So I prefer to talk with a Nobel Prize winner over his or her work, because then I can learn something. So to give this background, it was a question of what. Your question was what I would have liked to hear. It's very dangerous, because then the speaker keeps speaking about the ideal question. So the bottom line is, if there is any way that any group of people can help me to start an undergraduate, something like a liberal arts college, at the same time something like the Institute for Advanced Study. That is what I would like to put together. The liberal arts college is a realistic way to have enough time to have a sense of contemplation. If I would have a 4-year education and half the time would be full-time, well, half the time would be full-time contemplation. I mean, half the time would be contemplation, half the time science. I would have done a lot more contemplation than I've done in my life. So each of these students I would have to defer to. Isn't it a crazy world? And it's something so important and so that's the idea. And if you ask me, the second half of the question, how can we help you? That's of course, well, it depends. If somebody has enough time to do anything on the level of being part of anything. I mean, of course we need money, but money is not enough if you don't have people who are dedicated and who agree with the goal and who can work as a team. It wouldn't work. So, is this clear enough? That, yeah? Volunteer? No, I'm just kidding. Yeah?
Thank you so much. I would love to hear a kind of example of a conversation you would like to have with someone who is bridging the science and contemplation disciplines.
If you would have asked me 5 weeks ago, I would have come up with answers. I mean, if you are a professor long enough, you come up with answers. That is always the case. But now I can come up with a better answer. And I said that I myself have not had an equal conversation with contemplative of my small level and scientist. But there is a book which came out on April 1st. It's very fitting because it was almost like a joke. There's a book which came out by a very interesting person. He studied Tibetan Buddhism for a while and other traditions. Then he said, well, to really go into that, that would not be the best way of using my abilities. So he decided to go back to the Western world. He was in the Himalayas for a number of years, and he studied neuroscience. And he got a PhD, and he is now working on his MD, and he wants to get a job in psychiatry. But he is probably the person in my life who is most like me. He wrote a book over several years in his spare time, besides doing first contemplation and then science. And he went to the Einstein archives in Jerusalem, as well as reading whatever he could put his hand on Einstein's biography. And he found a number of places where it turned out that Einstein was much more like a contemplative. And that was shocking. I mean, how can it be that somebody already had the keys? We don't think, nobody knows, but he probably did not do a specific practice. And maybe, well, that was not where he wants to put his interest, but he did have a number of remarkable insights. And the amazing thing is, which I heard from the man who wrote it, when the book came out and I got a copy, I immediately sent an email, and then we had lunch together. Sorry? His name is Kieran Fox, and I don't remember the exact name of the book. If you Google Fox and Einstein, that sounds like a parable, but Einstein and the Fox, that sounds better. Yeah. Kieran, K-I-E-R-A-N, the first name K-I-E-R-A-N, yeah, and Fox, and something about I remember the book, but no, not the title. It should be easy to find with some Googling, or a ChatGPT will definitely give it to you. So it came out that, so here is one example. When I had the good luck that I happened to be in Berkeley last week, and he happens to live in San Francisco, by chance or whatever it is. So I had brunch with him, and we talked for 4 hours, and we both were surprised how similar our interests were. And he gave a few examples. I had started to read, but I haven't had time to read the whole book. One example he gave was that Tagore and Einstein, it's fitting for this audience, Tagore and Einstein had a couple meetings. And I was aware of that only recently. I just stumbled upon it. And I read the transcript of one of these meetings, not literal transcript, but a description from somebody who was there and who wrote down what happened. And then a biographer took these notes and then summarized it for a biography. There must be 100 biographies of Einstein, I'm sure. And the amazing thing is that while I was reading a year ago or so, while I was reading the summary of the discussion, they came closer and closer and closer to each other. And then they veered away. They didn't seem to really understand each other's point. And I already, while reading it, it's like sometimes if you see a movie and it comes to the cliffhanger, you think, oh, why don't you do this? Or why don't you do this? So I felt if I would have been there, I would have told Tagore or Einstein, like, you should say it this way or you should say it that way. But then I thought, well, that's one of these flukes of history. It wasn't meant to be, maybe, who knows. But then Kiran told me that one of the things he found is that in the original notes, there were a few lines which were left out. That is when they met each other. But the biographer could not understand it. The only thing he could do was leaving it out because he thought that was just a random remarks, like give me the cookies or pour me the tea or whatever. He really had no idea. And time and again that had happened. So amazingly, it seems that Einstein was much closer to contemplation science coming together than we all thought.
Thank you, Professor. Excellent discourse. I have a simple question. Since Einstein is being invoked so many times, one of his famous sayings is, everything should be made as simple as possible, but not simpler. And we often forget the last part, not simpler. So my question to you is, as we strive for this unification, is there a point where we are trying to overdo it? And why not stop at some point and accept that there is a difference?
Well, in this case, I can't help but quoting another person around the same time, Niels Bohr. And Niels Bohr said that the opposite of a great truth is also a great truth. So the idea that something should be as simple but not simpler, that the opposite would be if you make it even simpler, it's probably okay, or it might be okay, not probable, very improbable, but it might be okay.
So, see, in the wakeful state of one being conscious and aware of the things around, can one really go to the unconscious state or the deeper level when you say that, deeper level of contemplation? So, is it that possible? Like what it means to have this meditative state of being in a wakeful, conscious mind?
Well, to talk with Niels Bohr, yes and no. But to go back to your notion about simplicity, if you make things simpler and you think you can stop there, then it probably doesn't work. But you have to go deeper. But you have to go deeper in a way that there is no you anymore. So it's a koan. I mean, it's a great koan to sit with, and then hopefully at some point you see something, and then if fortunately besides sitting you do other things, you are exposed to the world and you get more. But the basic thing is that it is so simple. That is what Rushbrook said 700 years ago. It is so simple that you can't imagine, you can't believe it, and therefore you have to, as they often say, you have to travel around the world to find your home. Or another nice image, in Christianity, there is this text, look, I'm knocking at the door, and those who hear me and invite me in, they will dine with me, have a meal, whatever. I forgot the exact details. It is one of these notions saying that reality is knocking on your door. For all of us, each moment reality is knocking on our door. But we are sitting inside and say, oh, how can we find reality? We don't hear the knocking. Another image, I mean, every contemplation has these images. At some point you recognize them. The poor man living on buried treasures, and being so close but not knowing that he has to dig rather than just to try and make a living in a very, very difficult way. But maybe if we still have a little bit of time, after all this talking, I suggest that we do a few very short meditations, not in any traditional way, but let's maybe spend 3 minutes not talking and maybe not thinking, although that will be hard, but you can think. Think is also a path. Everything is a path. It's so close by. I would like to suggest 3 times 3 minutes to just think for yourself, what would it mean? What would it mean to go from a focus on matter to a focus on mind? What would it mean to go from a focus on self to a focus on other? What would it mean to go from a focus on space to a focus on time? And just each of these 3, ask yourself the question and see what comes up. Maybe you hear something knocking. And if not, just keep doing it. If you want to do this or any other of the million meditative techniques. So let me play the timekeeper. So if you right now think, okay, I've heard all these words, but yes, I can sort of see that our society, our civilization, our culture, I can sort of see that we are too much matter-oriented. I would say either close your eyes or just look into whatever direction that you're not too much distracted, and let us spend all 3 minutes to think or feel or intuit, whatever it would be, just to stay with the question: what would the world be like? What would I be like? And what would the world be like if we would give more attention to the mind? And what could that possibly be? Enjoy. Mm-hmm. So that was 3 minutes. Whatever you did must have been right, because there is no way to do this wrong. It is a pure it's a pure sense of imagination. Like we are here only a couple 2 minutes walking from Imagine, the memorial for John Lennon. So that's all that we are doing. We are imagining a world in which mind would have equal respect and attention as matter. So now let's go to the next 3 minutes. So this is about self and other. If you ask me how do I see the unity between self and other, the non-duality, because you don't know what the unity is, so you start from the negation, the non-duality. If you try to imagine what that would be like, that by itself is a very, very good meditation. So let's do that for 3 minutes. Imagine that people would realize in some way or other, you and others, that there is no difference between you and other on a very deep level. So let's give that 3 minutes. Welcome back to this world. one thing which I realized that I should have said in the talk is that whenever I talk about everything is already perfect and you are as holy as you want to be, in Hinduism and Buddhism, these things are explained in a way that we are used to, especially in the last few decades. But throughout Christianity, the idea of sin strikes us as very strange. It's not in that case, in that particular way, recognizable in other places. Although, of course, in Buddhism, everything is suffering, dukkha, out of kilter. But in Christianity, if you only think about the negative part of sins, then you missed the main point. And the main point is that the Christian way of saying that you are already perfect is that Christ died on the cross, and therefore he took away all the sins. So everybody is, from that moment on, perfect. We all have our favorite traditions. Probably most people are not focused on Christianity, but it's there as well as everywhere else. So we can start imagining, reading about every tradition and seeing what is the core, what Ramakrishna did. So to give a little bit inspiration for the third meditation, if you can follow Ramakrishna's example of really looking for the same unity in all the polarities, not in this or that, but a universal unity. It sounds terrible if you look at it in through the eyes of people who say, oh, everybody has to go my path, that is the universal path. That is the worst thing. But the universality is that the path which doesn't give any answers that you expect, but which can give you a reality, a realization, that is the nice word, which can give you a realization. That one is universal. And Totapuri I mentioned for those who are first in the Gospel of Ramakrishna. That is for me the most beautiful chapter. Well, equally beautiful as that of the kitten and Kali, two sides of a coin. So now that we are that I mentioned this as sort of an interlude, that you can recognize everywhere the same basic idea that everything there is nothing and nothing needs to be done. Now we go from space to time, and that is the most tricky, the most challenge. I kept it till the end. Now I invite you for 3 minutes to think what it would be like if you would really understand time, and if you would really be in touch with time, if you would realize what time is. And as a little spoiler, the idea is that at every moment, everything is already present and nothing is lacking. It's not my spoiler, I mean, it's in all the traditions. It's a way of gauging the depth of a tradition when they come to that point, when that can be pointed out literally. So the third one is not staying with space and fantasizing about the future and the past, but really seeing what it's trying to see, trying to imagine what it would be like to realize time, to realize in this moment that all is already here. Good luck. Enjoy. Welcome back. And thank you for your participation. It was really wonderful.
And thank you, Professor, for a very unique and fun class. I think you've introduced us into a whole new style of Q&A. Again, many, many thanks, and we've really enjoyed having you here again. Thank you so much for coming.